Hi, I'm Pamela Jacobson. I'm a senior lecturer at the University of Bath. So I'm delighted to introduce Tom Jenkins, who's doing his PhD with us. And Tom's focus is on looking at how we can conceptualize and measure dehumanization. And Tom's particularly thinking about this in relation to developing therapies and interventions for people who may experience some distress, and looking at which interventions may particularly help target dehumanization, because we think this is something that might be important for people's recovery.
Super, thanks very much. So Tom, over to you.
Great, thank you. Thank you, Pamela. Can everybody see the slides okay?
Yes.
Fantastic. Yeah, so I'm Tom. I'm a second year PhD student at the University of Bath. And my project is on experiences of dehumanization in psychosis. So my PhD has three main aims, the first of which is to conceptualize dehumanization and discuss its relationship to mental health, and also talk about how it implicates people with mental health conditions. I've done this in the form of a conceptual review. The second aim, and this is what I'm going to be speaking about most today, is to develop a novel measurement tool, so a questionnaire, which measures experiences of self-dehumanization in people with psychosis. And third, then, the aim is to validate this measure within a clinical population of people with psychosis. So what is dehumanization? Dehumanization is the conception of another person as less than fully human. It's a social psychology that has its origins in, it's a concept which has its origins in social psychology, and looks at in-group and out-group prejudice, particularly how members of an in-group can deny humanity to members of an out-group. More recently, the concept of self-dehumanization has been developed, and this is then when a person begins to feel as though they're less or other than human. People with psychosis have reported this as a distressing part of their experience, and may also be uniquely vulnerable to self-dehumanization. In part, this is due to the stigma and the stereotypes that surround psychosis. Evidence suggests that people with psychosis are dehumanized more so than people from a non-clinical population, but also more than people with other mental health conditions, such as depression or anxiety. And people with psychosis also describe the inherent nature of psychosis as being dehumanizing. So the experience of hearing voices, for example, or the experience of hallucinations, which sets them apart from other people and therefore makes them feel less than human. So we wanted to try and find a way in which to measure this, and because we were interested in its role within psychological therapies, but we looked through the literature and couldn't find a way which has been properly validated, which means that we couldn't be sure whether the questionnaire was measuring what it says it was going to be measuring. So we decided to take it upon ourselves to develop our own measure. And the process is here. It roughly looks like this. So going from left to right. And what I'm going to be talking about mostly today are these first two parts of the process. So the item generation and some focus groups. So this was all about developing a big long list of items or statements, which we could potentially ask on the final version of the measure. I will say that we worked with a PPI consultant throughout the development of the study materials, the information sheets, anything participant facing, and we also got some feedback on the study design as well, which was a really important part of this. So before I go into too much depth, I'll give a bit of background on measure development, because I'm aware there's a few new terms and perhaps a bit of jargon that people aren't familiar with. So at the top here, we have a construct. So a construct is just a thing that we're going to be measuring. So in our case, that thing is self-dehumanization. Constructs then sometimes break down into domains, which are categories of experience. So if we think of a construct being a tree, the domains are its branches, its leaves, its roots, its bark, etc. Below the domains then are items. So items are the statements on the questionnaire which we agree or disagree with. So the purpose of these statements is to tap into those domains, and the domains then reflect the construct that sits on top. So with that in mind, we began this process of item generation, which is effectively coming up with a list of statements to measure the construct of self-dehumanization. We've done this through two main methods of inquiry. Deductively, which is theory-driven. So we've conducted a literature review to look at all the ways in which self-dehumanization has previously been conceptualized and measured. We've also done it inductively, which is data-driven. So we've done some qualitative research and some PPI consultations to try and get some information from the bottom up as well about what might comprise self-dehumanization. So the literature review, after doing a big search of all the ways in which self-dehumanization has been measured, the main domain which came out of this is this denial of human qualities. Human qualities is a very broad term, of course, and different measures will count different traits or characteristics as being reflective of human qualities. So things like interpersonal warmth, competence, cognition, feelings, agency, experience. These are all different types of ways in which humanity has been conceived of in the past. We've also then done some inductive research. This was a qualitative study conducted by a colleague of mine. This spoke to 20 people who hear voices about their experiences of self-dehumanization. You can see the demographic makeup here. It's a very mixed sample, it's a very diverse sample. I believe there was 11 males, 9 females, and no non-binary people within the sample as well. And the question asked was, how do you experience self-dehumanization? And from this came 6 main themes or domains of experience. The first of which was extent of distressing psychosis. So this really refers to how people can feel dehumanized by the nature of psychosis, by the experience of hearing voices. Second was a sense of belonging with other humans. So people really describe how feeling disconnected from other people around them can contribute to that feeling of dehumanization. Thirdly, then, the integrity of the self as a private and coherent entity. So feeling like that self-concept has been fragmented and fractured as a result of the psychosis, which again contributes to that feeling of dehumanization. Fourth, a sense of worth as a human being. So people with psychosis in this study were saying that they felt less valuable as a result of their experiences. Fifth, strength of personal agency. So this really looks at how when somebody does not feel in control of their own experience, they can begin to feel dehumanized. So personal agency is a big thing which gives us our sense of being human. And finally, then, trust in one's own credibility and reliability. So feeling like the self can be trusted, again, is a big part of feeling human, and again, a big part of feeling less than human. So we've taken these 6 domains from the qualitative study and the 7th there from the literature review. That's our 7 domains of experience, which we've got from the 2 methods of inquiry. And we wanted to check these to make sure that, just to validate them really. So we've done this with a group of PPI consultants. This was a group of 5 people with lived experience of psychosis. We had 2 separate focus groups, the first of which was to discuss these 7 domains. So we presented the 7 domains of experience, and we simply asked, do you agree with these? Do you disagree with these? Do you think these should be changed or amended in any way? And the group was, the group really agreed with what we had found, actually, which was quite interesting. It shows some triangulation of our findings. The group had many personal anecdotes and stories which really resonated with each of those domains, but they had nothing new to add or suggest. So again, it shows that our findings from the deductive and inductive research were actually valid within another population. We then did a second focus group. The purpose of this was to generate items, so to draw out statements from each of those domains. So we came up with a draft list, a first draft, which we presented to the group. This draft was taken from the previous measures of self-dehumanization, so from the deductive literature review, and also then from the transcripts from the qualitative research from the inductive. So we took a big list of items to the group. The group were very, very helpful. They suggested some rewording of some of the items. They told us to get rid of some of the items, and they've also suggested some new items. So now we've got a big long list of 58 items, which is going to go into a process of being cut down because we want this to be, again, quite concise and clinically meaningful. So you can see now, again here, to think back to the diagram a few slides ago, we've got our construct at the top, self-dehumanization. The domains then go beneath it. So these are the ones that have come from the qualitative study and also from the literature review. So those 7 domains of experience. And below then in blue, you can see some examples of some of the items which represent and reflect those experiences. So where does this leave us? We've now completed the first two parts of this measure development, which are the ones highlighted in bold, the item generation and the focus groups. Next, and in a few weeks' time, we're about to begin a Delphi study. So this recruits people with lived experience of psychosis, carers of people with psychosis, mental health professionals, and also dehumanization researchers, so a group of expert stakeholders. And we're going to ask them to rate or to rank which statements best reflect the experience of self-dehumanization. So this will help us to find which ones are most relevant, and it will also then help us to cut down that list of 58 items into something a lot more manageable. We'll then go into cognitive interviews, which is where we will invite people with psychosis to complete the measure and get feedback really on whether or not the items are making sense to people. And this will allow us to make adjustments and amendments and make sure the measure is really user-friendly towards the end. And finally, then we'll go into the reliability and the validity, which is the statistical tests that check to see if the measure is measuring what it says it's measuring, and also doing so reliably and consistently over time. The implications of this are firstly to draw attention to and understand self-dehumanization and it's perhaps how it impacts people with psychosis. This in turn, then we can begin to look at how psychological therapies such as CBT or mindfulness-based therapies can be adapted to really start to emphasize that humanizing component, help people to recognize their common humanity and to hopefully feel a little bit more human. So yeah, thank you very much for listening. Thank you to Mental Health Research UK for the support you've given me. Thank you to my two brilliant supervisors, Pamela and Paul, and also to my research group as well, the Bath Centre for Mindfulness and Community, with that pictured there. Yeah, thank you. Happy to take